Welcome to our look back at some recent NBR video interviews in Nbr Interviews. I'm Paul Brennan, and coming up, supporting tradies, PowerCo Nalmaira CEO on addressing power poverty, an author's view on how good ideas are ignored in an economy built for men, and there's more. First up, the first 6 months of 2021 have been lucrative for investors, according to Craig's Investment Partners Head of Private Wealth Research, Mark Lister. But as global share markets have climbed to new heights, the local benchmark index has played catch-up, although it wasn't doing too badly. Craig's Mark Lister joined the NBR's Reweti Koheri.
One really interesting dynamic that we've seen through the first 6 months of this year has been that global share markets have performed really well. So whether it's the US market or Europe, even Australia, all up sort of 14 or 15%. But the NZX 50 has lagged a little bit, and it's not doing too badly. It's down about 3% or thereabouts. So, I guess if you're a KiwiSaver member or if you're an investor, you'll have done quite well from your international shares. But the New Zealand portion of your holdings might have just been a bit of a laggard, and that's happened for a range of reasons. I don't think it's anything to be too concerned about. We did have quite a good year last year, but this year hasn't lent itself to being quite as lucrative for investors in the local market.
And in terms of the June quarter, where might investor returns end up?
Yeah, pretty good as well. I think across the board, share investors will have enjoyed some positive returns. Locally, again, just lagging a little bit compared to some of those international markets that are more exposed to this strong economic rebound that we're seeing in places like the UK or Europe or the US as the restrictions come off and those lockdown sort of rules are eased. So again, the international parts of share markets have performed better. Fixed income's been quite interesting as we've seen interest rates rise from those very low levels that we saw 3 months ago, 6 months ago. Bond returns or fixed income returns haven't been quite so good because higher interest rates means that bond prices tend to be a little bit lower. So as always, a mixed bag, but certainly not too bad. And markets are feeling reasonably optimistic about the future.
Turning to the week ahead, Mark, ANZ Bank's Business Confidence Survey, the final read for June, where might that stack up?
Yeah, well, this will be an interesting one. Now, business confidence has been very strong over the last few months, and the preliminary survey for June, which is sort of the early release, pointed to the Own Activity Index, which is a really important piece of that survey, being at the highest levels we've seen since mid to late 2017. So business confidence has been high. To be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if it comes off the boil just a little bit, because we have seen a bit of volatility in markets. We've seen the Reserve Bank talking about the OCR rising more quickly than we might have thought before. And you've seen, obviously, the Trans-Tasman bubble has been paused in some ways with a resurgence of virus numbers across the Tasman. So a couple of those bits and pieces might have just weighed on confidence, and you might actually see it just decline slightly. But we'll be watching that later in the week.
Craig's Investment Partners Head of Private Wealth Research, Mark Lister, there with the NBR's Reweti Koheri. Now from our expat files, Annette Timpani's plumbing firm worked on Buckingham Palace and new London office towers. Work-life balance, mental well-being, reliability, excellence. When Annette Timpani started her plumbing and heating firm with her plumber husband in London, these weren't concepts immediately associated with tradies in the UK. Now she and her family are back in New Zealand, settling in Wanaka. In her role as a non-executive director of Tradeify, she's keen to reprise an idea she had in the UK for what she calls a toolbox academy that would equip tradies not just with financial business skills, but with softer skills such as customer service. Tradeify is New Zealand's #1 job management platform for Kiwi tradies. And Annette Timpani joined the NBR's Nicola Shepherd.
I'm very familiar with the Wanaka market and how things operate in the Wanaka area. So we don't have a lot of large-scale commercial contracts in Wanaka, although the population is growing very fast, so I'm sure that will come up in the future. There's a much more relaxed attitude here in Wanaka. A lot of plumbers and tradies like to call it the Wanaka way. So the people if there's a powder day on the mountain, then it's all tools down, for example. You wouldn't get that in the United Kingdom. There's actually a lot more relaxed attitude towards health and safety here, which needs to change. The apprentices, they are trained very, very well here in New Zealand. They have a much more extensive learning experience. And in the United Kingdom, it's a bit shorter, and they're very much trained in a very old-fashioned way. So from my experience, the apprentices in New Zealand seem to be better qualified and better trained. And that's why when they go to the United Kingdom, as full-fledged plumbers, they can walk straight on site with a gold card and off they go. However, on the flip side of that, I think New Zealand has a real challenge attracting foreign qualified, experienced tradespeople to New Zealand's shores, which I believe we need with this big construction boom, because we don't recognise that same level of qualification on the other side of the world. And for example, my husband's pretty much gone back to basics and having to go back through learning his trade again, even though he's worked in Buckingham Palace's central heating system and he's run a multi-million-pound company. It just doesn't seem right. And also the wages, the salary in New Zealand is a lot less than they would earn in the United Kingdom.
Meanwhile, you've joined Tradeify as a non-executive director, and I understand that happened through Tradeify getting in touch with Kia, the network for Kiwi expats abroad. And so tell me, what will you bring from your UK experience to your Tradeify role?
So they brought me on, I believe, predominantly for my UK experience. The Tradeify are really pushing into the United Kingdom now and looking to gain market share there. But as we just talked about, there's a lot of differences between tradies in the Southern Hemisphere as opposed to tradies in the United Kingdom. So they were really looking to me for that knowledge experience to get a really holistic and well-rounded idea of what that tradesperson is looking for, what they're motivated by. And I can definitely deliver that in spades. There was also, because Tradeify is helping tradies run their businesses better and manage their workflow better. And that was my job in the United Kingdom, to make our business go from very small to just myself and my husband, right up to 75 plumbers. We went through that entire journey and process from very small to very big. And so I understand exactly what it takes to grow a trades business. But on the other side of the world. So I believe I'll be able to bring that to them as well. And I was also working on a little project before I left the United Kingdom called the Toolbox Academy. And that was a little program I was developing that was going to help tradies run their businesses better. So do little videos on how to turn an angry customer into a happy customer, and all these other kind of other skills that are not necessarily directly related to payroll and cash flow, but all the other skills that go with running a business. So I'm bringing all of that to the Tradeify, I believe.
Tradeify non-executive director Annette Timpani speaking to the NBR's Nicola Shepherd there. You're watching NBR Interviews, compiled highlights of recent NBR video interviews popular with NBR subscribers. Government venture fund Elevate has made its largest investment to date, committing $45 million to venture capitalist Global from Day One's third fund. GD1 is an investor in high-growth tech ventures, including electric utility bike maker Oopco, wearable tech pioneer Stretch Sense, and digital video advertising firm Shuttle Rock. Its Fund 3, which is still open for investment, is hoped to be more than double the size of its previous two funds, with a target amount of $140 million. Joining the NBR's Maria Slade was GD1's Vignesh Kumar and Elevate's James Pinner.
Fund 3, it represents kind of the inflection point really for us at Global from Day One. And we've always historically invested in fast-growing early-stage New Zealand technology businesses with the purpose of going global. And that really continues with Fund 3. And so Fund 3, we've brought on more investment capability and global operational capability into the team. And so we're really excited to be able to catalyze on that. We've already warehoused quite a number of really interesting top-tier deals, and we're excited to have the support of James and NZGCP continue with us on that journey from Fund 2.
So it's quite a reasonable scale, isn't it, this one?
Yeah, so Fund 3 is a target size $140 million fund. And so for us, Fund 2 was a roughly $60 million size fund where we were cornerstoned by NZGCP's kind of previous iteration, NZVIF, and an offshore sovereign wealth fund, and a mix of kind of high net worths and family offices. And with Fund 3, it really is that evolution where we've kind of increased in capability in scale, and we're really adding firepower to the local ecosystem. So it really represents a kind of nice turning point for us, not only us, but also for the ecosystem, kind of giving an alternative to other sources of capital, value-add capital that matters.
So how important is the 45 million of government funding in this?
Look, I think government funding is always a great sign of support. When you cast your eyes back to the New Zealand ecosystem in general, private equity players, for example, mid-market, used to always be cornerstoned by government entities and kind of this kind of private wealth type platforms before slowly getting the independence to kind of be self-sufficient funds. I think with venture capital, the role that NZGCP plays is kind of similar to that happened a decade or so ago with the private equity mid-market type players. So it is super important for funds. And it's a great thing to have NZGCP come in so emphatically in Fund 3 with 45 million, their largest commitment to VC to date. And so again, really thankful for that opportunity. And for us, first close will definitely be landing closer to the 100 million. So that's coming up very soon. So we're excited by the opportunity.
So James, why global from day one?
As Vignesh said, we invested in the previous fund through our previous venture investment fund. So we've been following these guys for quite a few years. We've always said we're not going to really elevate fund. We're following commercial best practice, and we're the funds we have the highest conviction in. We're looking for the to back the funds which we think have got the best opportunity to grow to scale and have meaningful contribution to New Zealand companies. GD1 has, as Vignesh has said, has grown through the years. We've been really impressed with how they've built out the team in terms of both the general partners, but also strong advisory boards, both locally and internationally. It's a real focus on supporting their companies, helping them grow, a lot of operational capability, especially for hardware-backed companies. And admittedly, the previous fund is still relatively early in its lifespan. It's 2016 vintage, but it's demonstrating a lot of good traction, and we've done a very detailed due diligence process over these guys, and we ended up having very high conviction in backing them.
You said that it's important that they've matured into an institutional grade VC. Why is that important for you?
Well, partly because we want to see more institutional money into investing into venture capital in New Zealand. One of the reasons Elevate was created was to help over the long term, especially to demonstrate that New Zealand venture capital can make good returns. But it's also about building scale as well. So building a sufficient team and capability to really help originate, make good investment decisions, and then add value to those companies over time. And we think with this kind of scale, obviously, one of the key constraints with some of the bigger institutional investors is the ability to write large checks and the materiality of their checks. So this is now getting to that size where they've got both the capability and the size, which we hope will attract some institutional money.
Elevate's James Pinner, and before him GD1's Vignesh Kumar with the NBR's Maria Slade there. You're watching NBR Interviews, compiled highlights of great recent NBR video interviews. I'm Paul Brennan. Thanks for watching. Kaupapa Māori Power Co. Nbr has shut its doors to thousands of new customers to focus on serving those living in power poverty, and is doubling down by encouraging consumers who can afford to change retailers to make the switch. Nbr CEO Ezra Hirawani says the right to electricity is being treated as a privilege. He joined the NBR's Rewati Koheri.
We go out every day seeking partnerships of those in different work streams that dedicate themselves to different things that we try to achieve in the industry, and really try to weave ourselves and our people into that offering to be able to come out with a full solution to a multifaceted problem, which is power poverty. So we believe that not one company can do it, but a collective or a collection of companies who share the same philosophies and ethos around the issue will be able to do it as one.
And in terms of, I guess, the policies of bringing on board customers and keeping them and working with them, what does that look like?
So here at No Mai Rā, we have no disconnection policy. In fact, our disconnection policy is no disconnection, and we don't have any credit checks, so there's no barrier for joining our whānau here at No Mai Rā, and no barrier to stopping us from supporting you regardless of background, so Māori or not. We're here for those suffering with an energy hardship.
Why have those sorts of policies? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to instill in your whānau?
Yeah, we've got a petition out at the moment, and in that petition outlines a lot of the things that we're trying to instill. And one of those being, having the confidence and mana to be able to take control of their power and their situation within their household, which power is, to be able to drive confidence in other areas of their lives, to be able to elevate themselves out of poverty as a whole. So
no credit check, no disconnection policy. Why have you tied your business to this issue of power poverty? Why focus on people first and pūtea or money later?
Yeah, again, we didn't start that way. We just saw it as a money-making opportunity. But again, as we kind of saw a lot of the social inequities in the industry, it was almost like we couldn't ignore the facts and we had to go to the rescue. And we were really the only ones at the time that we thought were actually willing to do so. And so we pivoted quite strong into this area simply because power is an essential service and no one should have the ability to be able to stop someone else from being able to heat their home. Power, in our opinion, should be a right, not a privilege. And it's traded like a privilege at the moment. And so we want to work with, all industry players to be able to change that narrative, and that making sure that people are the focus in every decision made when it comes to heat, warmth, and kai, and different things the household needs to be able to sustain their whānau.
So picking up on this petition then, why do you feel that you had to go down this route? Why a petition? Why not just talk face-to-face to those that you're calling on for help or support? Yeah, for sure. We tried that. So we've spoken to everyone that we're petitioning with or against, or however you want to put it. And there's a continual pattern that happens within the industry that it's never someone's responsibility to solve a particular piece of the puzzle. It's always that's someone else's job to solve. So passing the buck.
Passing the buck. And the buck actually ends up being charged to the whānau. And so all the buck passing actually results in a negative impact for those who are struggling to actually heat their homes. And so the petition's really aimed at forcing conversations that there's no more passing of the buck. So we can sit down and actually sort out a problem that's plagued our people for such a long period of time. It's not about creating an us and them, a big against small, a Maori against Pākehā. It's more about let's sit down at the table and stop ignoring the issue and actually sort it out with the players in the room who can actually solve the problem. And so it's basically forcing a conversation to happen where we are going to head to that meeting in the spirit of manaakitanga and willingness to work together as one.
Kaupapa Māori Power Co, Nau Mai Rā CEO Ezra Hirawani there with the NBR's Rewati Kohere. This is NBR Interviews NBR readers have been watching at nbr.co.nz. Now the book review by former NBR editor Neville Gibson. The book is Mother of Invention, How Good Ideas Are Ignored in an Economy Built for Men by Swedish author Katrine Marcel. Neville joined me in the NBR studio.
Well, the title says it all. It's How Good Ideas Get Ignored in an Economy Built for Men. This is a feminist book, right, as you might expect from a Swedish writer. She's actually based in London, and to kick it off, she's got a really good example. The wheel was invented about 5,000 years ago in Europe, but it wasn't picked up by a lot of societies. In fact, many of them didn't see any use for wheeled transport at all. And this included the age of travel, when women started travelling around. Suitcases became very common, but it wasn't until 1972 that someone patented putting wheels on suitcases. And of course, this was an invention made for women, but it was picked up by an executive at Macy's, the big department store in New York, and just took off like a rocket. Now we've got quite sophisticated suitcases on wheels. Now they've got 4, and they're pretty standard all around the world and certainly seen in every airport.
So 5,000 years to get from the fundamental invention to wheels on suitcases not too long ago. And I guess that was driven by the fact that more and more women were travelling. Luggage was heavy. I guess I'm assuming traditionally men dealt with the luggage or carried it up until that explosion of travel. And that's where the demand for the smart guy who patented it at Macy's came in.
Well, it's not quite known whether it was the wheeled suitcases that allowed many more women to travel independently or the other way around. But the point that Marcel is making is that some of these good ideas took a long time to be absorbed into the system and become useful. In fact, the book is a history of technology right from the very ancient days through to the present day.
But technology is driven by the demand, well, the creativity of whoever at the time and the demand. It's not really a conscious effort to create technology for specific groups as such. They just start out as general ideas, don't they?
Well, the whole book is really just cherry-picking a lot of examples that prove the point. It's a bit like a film documentary. You only put into the documentary what you want to advance the case. And one telling one, though, that people can relate to today is that when motor cars were first invented, they were battery-powered. They were also the internal combustion engine. So around about 1900, these vehicles were both available, but the electric ones were clean. They were not very noisy, very quiet, and they went well on paved streets, so they appealed to women and were marketed as a women's product. Men, meanwhile, they could crank the engines, they didn't mind the noise, but the internal combustion engine took off and dominated the history of cars right up until just recently. But just imagine if that battery-powered cars had been developed alongside the ICE ones.
Because Tesla was around at the time making great strides. But again, it comes down...
making light bulbs.
comes down to that one, surely reliability and the distance or the endurance of the vehicle compared to the battery. But I guess you could argue that would have all been advanced if they'd gone that way anyway.
Yeah, there's no question that the internal combustion engine could go on unpaved roads, that kind of thing. But of course, you look at the growth of motorways in America in the 1950s, they would have been ideal for a very advanced form of battery-powered car if it had been possible to invent it over that time.
What's the point she's trying to make? Is she trying to say that the technology was deliberately crafted in a misogynistic way, or something else? What's her main point?
She's really looking at one side of the coin. She's arguing that the women's side of the coin, inventions that women could have benefited from, were overlooked by males. It's not a history of women making inventions, because there's plenty of examples of that. And Tefal cooking is one example where the Tefal coating was known and used in machines and other things, but it was only much more recently after it was used in rockets and so on that somebody thought of putting it into pots and pans.
Right. Good read?
It is. It's written by a journalist, and she is not writing an academic history of the economics of innovation or anything like that. So it's full of anecdotes, and she's got the sources for them too, so there's quite a bit of learning there. And certainly she's very widely read in this particular area, and it's a piece of feminist advocacy that is just right for the time.
And the full review of Katrine Massal's Mother of Invention, How Good Ideas Are Ignored in an Economy Built for Men, is at nbr.co.nz right now. And join me again soon as we showcase more of the best NBR video interviews in NBR Interviews. I'm Paul Brennan. Thanks for watching.